Hello, everyone, and welcome to APQC's May 2022 KM webinar. Earlier this month, for those of you who don't know, APQC held its first in-person conference in 3 years. And it's always a great opportunity for human interaction, which we've all been craving, and networking, but it's also a chance for us to hear from our audience what they've been working on, what challenges they have, how they're solving them, and insights into KM's current state and future direction. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what we heard and some of the themes that we saw. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lauren Trees, and I lead APQC's knowledge management research. And ironically, even though I have been planning this conference for what feels like multiple years, I did not actually get to attend. I was in quarantine. So an unavoidable part of life in the 2020s, I guess. So I've seen a lot of the conference content. I feel well-versed on what happened on the various stages, but I was not there to get the word on the street. So my colleague, Cindy Hubert, got to be there. So I'm happy, Cindy, that you're here to talk about that. And we've also invited some special guests from our steering committee to help fill in the gaps and tell you all what happened at the conference. So hi, Cindy, and our guests, if you want to turn on your videos, we can say hello.
Hi, Lauren. And our goal is to get her to feel that warm, fuzzy hug that so many of us got to have 2 weeks ago.
That's right. You were missed, Lauren. You were certainly missed.
Yeah.
So do y'all want to introduce yourself real briefly?
I want to. So my name is Susan Pickles. I'm the knowledge manager at CRB Group, which is an architectural engineering, design, and construction firm that services the pharmaceutical industries. And I loved the conference. Darren?
Hi, everyone. I'm Darren Brogan. I'm with Chartis Group, which is a healthcare consulting firm. I head up their knowledge management function and also very much enjoyed the conference. It was a great session. Danielle?
Thanks, Darren. Yep, Danielle Spudage. I'm the knowledge management manager for All State Claims. And as they were sharing, it was so great to just chat with everyone and see everyone in person.
Oh, jumping. So I am so glad that all of you are here to help fill in some of these gaps. I know that there was great content. I know that for reasons I don't quite understand, our Masters of Ceremonies was wearing swim trunks on his bottom half for a bunch of the conference. I know that APQC's Chief Fun Officer, who is a dog, when visited with some of his friends. And I know that there was great speakers and great content and all of that. But I wanted to ask all of you who were there, just what it was like to come back and be face-to-face. Does it matter? What did you get from it? So Danielle, I don't know if you wanted to jump in here first.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, just being able to interact in person and sit at a table and chat through problems that we're all going through together. And even the picture that it shows on the top of just putting the physical sticky notes on a board together, there was something so powerful about that. So it was really great to be able to attend.
Susan, what was your experience like? Because it sounds like you had a good experience being face to face, and you're a very extroverted person.
I'm super extroverted and mildly obnoxious, I think, to most people. But in a big group setting, it's great because I can be diluted. I think the participation and the buzz was something that I missed. Like minds, we all kind of speak the same language, even though some of us were learning a new language. And from my perspective, the process world, but there was an energy at this conference that I haven't witnessed before, and I've been to a lot of conferences. Darren?
Yeah, I just echo the same comments, Susan. It was really nice just going anywhere, to be honest, but having like-minded individuals for the 2 days I was there for the actual conference itself was just really fantastic. Lots of new people because we brought in the process management elements of that conference, which used to be separate. it was just very engaging to meet so many new people that I had never seen before. So yeah, it was very well run and very smooth throughout the 2 days.
So Cindy, you are looking at this from a slightly different perspective. What was your experience being back face to face with folks and getting to have this this event?
You know, Lauren, all the things that have been said already, and it does give you that warm, fuzzy feeling, but I think what the face-to-face does, and we all know now we can operate in a virtual world, we can get work done, detailed work, hard work done, but I think what the face-to-face does is it reinforces the relationship, and it gives you just that extra insight into people that are our colleagues, our longtime friends, and allows us just to call upon each other even easier than it is in the virtual world. It just makes us seem human again. So it was a plus, I promise.
Cindy, can I just dovetail on that? Sorry.
Yeah.
I literally have had 4 meetings since the conference with colleagues in other companies, because I'm in a new role in a new company in a new industry, and having that connection and having that refueled during the conference has served me extremely well. So I had to jump in and say that.
Absolutely. Did not expect less. Thank you, Susan.
Well, and it all interests me as we think as knowledge managers about what we should do virtually, what we need to get funding to get people together face to face for knowledge sharing and relationship building. So I think it's a really important conversation. And I also just wanted to talk a little bit about the themes that I saw in the content and the conversations, to the extent that I was able to participate in them, coming out of the conference. And the first one, and this is validating to other research that we've done and work that we've done, is that I see KM's scope and reach really expanding within the organization. I think KM teams are being asked to do more. I think they're being asked to interact, consult, engage, support more parts of the business, and also expanding into new industries, different types of organizations. I just see the knowledge management conversations happening in more places across the business world. You know, so maybe you have a program that started in a technical area that's expanding out to cover the back office. Maybe you have a program that started in customer service, and then R&D or innovation or other groups are showing up and saying, hey, I think we could use some of what's happening over here. You know, and I also think that we're seeing mature KM programs, and even some of those startup KM programs level up to tackle new challenges and provide new capabilities. And some of that is around technology, obviously, but it's also high-tech, low-tech approaches to address emerging problems. Hey, we have a ton of growth. We have a lot of turnover. A lot of organizations are experiencing that. We need to change how we capture and deliver knowledge. So all of that excites me. And I wanted to see from the folks who are on the phone, some of you were at the conference, some of you weren't, just whether you are experiencing these different aspects of expansion within your KM program. You know, and I just put 3 of them on here. Are you seeing KM expand within your industry, first of all? So, you know, are more organizations or more teams, you know, is there more KM going on with the, you know, your benchmarking partners, your peers? Are you seeing KM within your organization come out to cover new functions, new user groups, new business areas or units? And then also, are you seeing KM expand its services and solutions, you know, to cover new areas? Maybe you used to just do communities and now you're doing content management, or vice versa, and just build up that portfolio of approaches. So we'll give people a couple seconds to vote here. You can just click off any that you're seeing. Cindy, did you see this expansion in the conversations that you had at the conference?
Absolutely. And part of it was our process friends were there too. So the whole process and knowledge play. I want to make a couple of points. So Susan Pickles, I want to pick up on what she said. You heard her say, I've been in this field of knowledge management with the discipline. I've led a program. I've grown a big program. Now I'm going to an industry that is a startup for basically knowledge management. And so we saw so many of those. It always amazes me, Susan, that organizations are just now, it's not that they haven't thought about it, but the fact that they're just now thinking about the formalization of it. And I think there are huge implications for us that we'll talk about as we go along the way in this whole thing, because you're ready to jump in and make it happen, but the organization kind of takes a little bit longer to get there. And that was one of my big ahas.
Well, in the poll results, this does not surprise me. I think we are definitely seeing KM move to cover new functions and users within organizations, and also obviously to offer new services and solutions. But 42% of you are saying you're seeing more KM in your industry. So that always interests me. That's a pretty big number across a cross industry mix.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to share a little bit of data. I can't resist. I promise this is the only slide in here with a chart on it. But I wanted to share the top industry groups that we saw at the conference. And obviously this is bringing our knowledge management and process management areas together. And some of these on this top list are ones that we have seen consistently throughout the years. We've always had a lot of presence in government and military, professional and business services, petrochemical, some energy and utility. But I also see some up and coming industries where we have seen a lot of growth and expansion of KM. Financial services and banking comes to mind. I think pharmaceutical comes to mind. Software comes to mind. So, I think some of these are growth technical industries, especially ones that are maybe confronting increasing complexity. But I think we also see a lot of services organizations that are trying to make sense of their information, draw insights from it, and use it to make better decisions and to provide better service. Cindy, does this kind of match where you see, and you said you saw some new titles as well of people at the conference?
I did, Lauren. That was my second point I wanted you to make with you guys. So I'm always interested and have been for years. Remember, we've been at this for over 25 years. So I see there are still some fabulous titles out there: Director of Knowledge Management, VP of Knowledge Services, Knowledge Manager, Chief Knowledge Officer. Those are all fabulous. And digital transformation and knowledge, those are all really good. But one of the things that I observed, remember, I get the list of you all, so I get to this purview that you don't always have, were the specialty titles that came out, which I think tells us not only are we seeing the breadth, but we're seeing the real focus that needs to happen. So here are a few. Collection curation lead, with the whole content management stuff going on because of digital transformation. I just don't think we were yet prepared for it. I think you're having to have some real specialty roles get in there. A knowledge transfer specialist. This person was embedded in the business. Global KM lead. We've seen that, but I saw a lot of things with global on it. Human exploration and operations CKO. It's one title. So, wow, I mean, you just see a lot of these happening, and I think that just is very promising. It'll tell me that either your teams are expanding or that your reach in terms of what you're getting people to do in the name of knowledge flow is happening. And I think that's a real positive thing for KM as a discipline.
And then the other point that I wanted to make here, and I've shared the tenure in either knowledge management or process management for our attendees and the organizations that they work for. And I think we do see some divergence where our attendees have more experience than the organizations that they lead and support KM and process for. And I always think that's interesting. I think that we're seeing, what it suggests to me at least, is that a significant number of organizations have hired KM staff from some of those more experienced industries, from some of those more experienced KM programs, just like Alan is saying in the comments, and like Susan was saying, to help them accelerate their development. So I think that's great. And we're also seeing some experienced KM professionals have to go in and figure out how to do this in a new industry, in a new environment, and new kinds of legacy systems. So I think there's a lot of learning opportunities for KM in this cycle. So the second theme that I wanted to talk about, and this may be leading the witness a little bit because our theme for the conference was very closely tied into this, but it's around partnerships and integrated strategies becoming more paramount. Our theme for the conference was around building the roadmap together, and really about building connections with your business stakeholders so that you can become part of the business strategy and have a seat at that strategic table, and also building great relationships, symbiotic relationships with different enablement functions, whether that's learning, IT, digital, HR, all these types of organizations within the company that are working towards some similar goals. And obviously, because we were bringing our process and knowledge management audiences together for the first time, one of the partnerships that we focused on was that process and knowledge partnership. And I think a couple of people have touched on it, but Cindy, how did you see this playing out at the event? Did you see people making connections between what the people on the process side were talking about and what the people on the knowledge side were talking about?
They were. There was a lot of learning, and that was one of our challenges. When Jeff Varney and I opened the conference, I said, change your dance card a little bit and maybe go to a session that is not related to knowledge management, if you're a knowledge manager, and go listen to the process, listen to the session with the lens of KM. And I think you'll get some different ideas. And I think that happened a lot, Lauren, to really influence that. But I know our panel has some thoughts about this too. We were just excited to orchestrate the serendipity that came with process and knowledge. Susan, you had some thoughts on this, I know.
I really did. Well, and of course, this ties directly into expanding KM's scope. So at our organization, because KM is new, but process is not, we've created knowledge services. So process and KM are on one team. We have to work together and we have to speak each other's language because, as was so relevantly brought up during the conference, knowledge is sticky and it needs process to make it flow. And that really resonated throughout the whole conference for me as we started to speak each other's language a little bit. Even though I wanted to kind of stick to my knowledge management roots, everything was so new for me that I was like, my security blanket was hard to get out of my comfort zone.
That's nice. That's nice, Susan. Susan, and then I don't know if Darren or Danielle, well, you guys, I want to piggyback on what you said. I had a discussion with one of our members at our networking reception, and heavy duty process. They've had a fabulous discipline for years, use frameworks, have a team, and the lead had just learned 3 weeks before that a knowledge management program was going to be set up at this organization. This is an organization that's been around quite a while and has, deep roots in culture. And my question was, okay, oh my gosh, so how are people going to view this? I just can't see it happening. And there is concern because we had a lot of discussion around barriers. And one of the barriers was just that integration, that whole cultural view of, is this going to be one more thing, KM in this case, that's having the need? And I think the conversation always comes back to culture, right? Lauren and panel, it always comes back to culture, because are people going to see this as one more thing with this deep-rooted process? And now KM's this new kid on the block. I think you've got to really think about how it happens fast and you don't confuse or upset your audience too much.
Well, that's absolutely true, especially with the expanding scope, right? So it's not just process or KM, it's innovation. It's how do we adopt and adapt to digital change? And how do we leverage that faster? So it's not extra. It's actually enabling us to be able to move with the times and stay fluid. And quite technically, everybody's been doing it. They're just putting a name to it now to give it the structure so that people understand the guidelines, is my opinion or my experience.
I love it.
Absolutely. I think that innovation frame is so important. I think that part of where I see process and knowledge really integrating is because I think that they solve some overlapping problems and the organization really sees it that way. This is some data from our Fixing Productivity Problems research, which was a partnership here at APQC between our process improvement and our knowledge management research practices. And what we found is that there's a lot of time being wasted both on process and knowledge inefficiencies. You know, people spending time on the process side, recreating processes, creating workarounds. On the knowledge management side, on trying to find the right information, trying to find the right people. And then when they can't find it, having to recreate that information or provide it over and over again to duplicate systems or different people who need it. And I think that when you put this kind of data in front of business leaders, and especially when process and knowledge can put that data in front of leaders in an integrated strategy and integrated conversation to say, you know, we can get you some time back so that you can innovate, so that you can deal better with change, you know, and have time for more value-added activities. That's where that the integration really serves the end user, the customer, and can help break through some of those barriers of, oh, you got another program, you want me to do another thing, I don't want to do that. So I think that can be really powerful. And this is from the breakout session from Sawyer Hamilton at Elevations Credit Union. And I really wanted to include it because I think it's a really nice, simple visual of some of how you combine process and knowledge, you know, where you have the process that defines the work. And then coming out of that, you have explicit knowledge and forms, job aids, procedures. You have people to govern that process and also to provide contextual expertise about that process. And you have a system that provides access to both of those things. And all of it, and this is certainly true for Elevations, they did a lot of their process and knowledge combination work in pursuit of the Baldrige National Quality Award, you know, and they really had a clear shared vision for improving the customer experience and making sure that customer experience was consistent and the same great experience every time somebody interacts with the credit union or walks in the door. And so I think that aligning it around that end business goal that you want to have, and then really thinking about how the tacit and explicit knowledge supports the execution of the work, can really help make this make sense for people who don't speak KM or speak process in their daily lives. So we started talking a little bit about digital, and that is my next theme. We can never get away from it, right? I think digital continues to both disrupt and transform KM. And certainly in the breakouts and the practitioner sessions that I got to listen to, you know, there's a lot of this. KM's being brought in to support digital initiatives. KM is trying to navigate around them, get some funding from them, is trying to rewrite the flood of knowledge, you know, through an entirely new set of systems and platforms. You know, and Cindy, I feel like in the conversations you were seeing a real connection between digital disruption and this increased emphasis on content management. And I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit.
She's not going to give me an hour to preach to you all. So guys, I had a theory going into the whole digital experience, and it's not, people are doing some really cool things around managing their content, proactively offering up. There's cases that we're working on, but I still think we're underwater with this whole thing. I think digital has let loose the whole information, content management, data. There's so much emphasis around security now in all of our organizations. And so it just keeps highlighting for me. And my theory is digital is driving this whole need for getting control and management around critical knowledge that's explicit, AKA content, and really making this happen. And it's not just a technology play. You can't do it without the technology, but it's got to be a business-led solution. And so I'm seeing more and more of that. I talk to people at the conference who are really taking that approach and taking a second, third look at content management. But yeah, Lauren, I think it's disappointing. You'd think we'd get around to it, but it's a big capability under our knowledge management umbrella.
Well, I think that's true. And I also think there are some organizations that are rethinking their approach to how you deliver KM services, how you manage knowledge in this digital world. And I do have an example in here. This one is from Grant Thornton, and they, like me, were not able to actually attend the conference, but they did record it for the digital package. And we've got a lot of content around what they're doing. And I love the way they've framed this concept of knowledge products, which is part of what the KM team's really focused on. They have the knowledge, they're focused on the critical knowledge, and they think of that as the data that's in your iPhone. And then obviously they have their underlying KM systems, which they think of as their Apple operating system, if you will. And what they're really focused on is building apps, which is how they think about these knowledge products. And those apps are really designed to help people do something faster, easier, or better. Whether that's around knowledge harvesting, finding and accessing knowledge, collaborating, and really improving that user experience with knowledge. And I think that is so critical in this world of digital disruption. We're hearing so many people who are struggling with too many places to search, too many places to go, too many places to contribute, and really making that easier for people through some kind of capabilities, whether they're high tech or low tech. And I did include also Grant Thornton's KM product lifecycle here. And I'm not going to go through all the details of this. We've got it all documented, but it really starts with understanding user requirements. It's a design thinking methodology. It has agile feedback loops. You're designing something, you're getting feedback, you're feeding that into that continuous improvement cycle. And I think in this world of constant digital disruption, you've got to take a step back from wanting to plan everything out. You've got to really understand user needs. You've got to design quickly. You've got to iterate a lot. You've got to gather a lot of feedback along the way. And I see that as the way that knowledge management can be successful, whether it's around content management, whether it's around technology development, but also whether it's developing a process to capture critical knowledge or, communities, whatever it is. I think people have gotten used to this different kind of design cycle that I think is really important.
It is.
So that brings me, and Cindy, you were saying earlier that it's all about culture. I really think that we can talk about digital, we can talk about technology, but so much of this comes down to people. And that really hit me going through a lot of the content from the conference, that as much as the processes and the technologies and the methodologies change, the secret sauce and the things that organizations struggle most with are the people and the culture. How do we engage people? How do we get their buy-in? How do we create things that they'll actually use? And how do we get them to change their behavior in the long term, especially in this very change fatigued environment? And I think on the next slide, I've got a couple of thoughts from our various keynote speakers. And I think my takeaways here at a high level is that you really need to understand your users before you build anything. And that's both the people who are going to sponsor and fund knowledge management and the people out in the business who are going to contribute, share, access, and use knowledge. You've got to have that iterative approach. And I really, one of my takeaways from Dan Kramer's keynote was around prototyping, because I tend to think that prototyping is something you do for products or software. And he was really expanded my thinking that you can prototype a process, you can prototype a program, you can prototype just about anything and put it out there in the world, see how it works, and gather feedback that you can put back into the design process. And I think that's really powerful. Another theme that really jumped out for me is around effective storytelling. I saw that in the keynotes and also in the breakouts, and especially helping your users, your audience, see themselves in the stories that you're weaving. Our keynoter, Lance Wheeler, talked about that a lot. Not just making the story relatable, but really giving participants opportunities to contribute to the story and collaborate with other participants, and kind of breaking down that barrier between speaker or communicator and audience. And I think in this world of virtual collaboration, that can be a really powerful lesson for knowledge management across the board. And then the final piece I have on here is around emotional intelligence. And our keynoter, Bill Benjamin, talked about that. Just really simple tools to recognize your own emotions and to behave better, in ways that help you influence others and solve problems more effectively. And Darren, when we were talking before the session, you said that you really felt like some of these KM adjacent skills from some of the keynotes and other sessions were really valuable. And I was hoping you could say a little bit more about your experience.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Lauren. So from my perspective, the APQC conference always adds value, whether this is your first time in KM and you're new to it, or you've been doing it for many, many years, as I have. So for me, the conference isn't a value add from the perspective of learning how to build communities of practice or what a taxonomy is. That's great for the people that are just relatively new to KM. For me, it's the KM adjacent things, whether that's through the networking opportunities, or in this case, as Lauren highlighted here, each of the keynote speakers had skills that I could use specifically in my role to help me do KM better, or just to manage myself better. So whether it was the design thinking skills, or the storytelling skills, or the emotional intelligence, all of which were essential to the conference itself this year. Those were all hugely valuable takeaways that I got from the conference that I can apply specifically with myself, with my team, with my organization. And that's why I think this conference continues to be, for me, such a great value add.
Thanks, Darren.
And not being at the conference, the thing that everybody came back and talked to me about was "don't drop your markers" from Bill Benjamin. So I was hoping one of you, maybe Susan, could just really, quickly explain what that was and why it was so powerful.
Yeah, he touched on emotional intelligence, and very quickly, your IQ is kind of how people, judge your worth. But there are people with very high IQs that never really make it in leadership roles, and it's because they lack that emotional intelligence. And he walked us through that markers that you can really only process through 4 things emotionally at a time. When you're feeling in crisis mode, or attacked, or if someone catches you off guard, it's fight or flight. And you want to work to keep those markers as much as possible, because if you drop one, you lose 75% of your emotional intelligence. So you don't think quickly on your feet, and you can't answer as you would if you had all 4 of your markers. So it was fascinating. And Lauren, if you don't mind, somebody asked a question that I think would be interesting to pose to the crowd here, because it's about personal KM systems, and to what extent are companies deploying KM as a key business process and fostering collaborators to build or use a personal workflow to manage their personal KM. I've always seen KM as more teamwork and collaboration, or collaborative. So I don't know if you or Cindy would have a little more color to put on that. But I didn't really necessarily see that at the conference. It was way more on that emotional IQ and design thinking, and how do we start seeing all the parts differently to continue to deliver these solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, Susan, this is Cindy. So I was looking at your response to the question on that too, and we don't see a lot of that. I think what we do see organizations building knowledge management into their process frameworks. In fact, APQC does that. And the reason we do it is because we don't have the resources to put a formal KM program up, but we want to make sure it's part of everybody's job. So ours gets baked in. I mean, I can only speak in our knowledge sharing and the activities we do around that to help knowledge flow. The conference is a great example of that, lessons learned and how we improve over each time. And that gets baked into the business process. And then somebody in the process role, because we have process roles, is accountable for that. So that's not a great answer. I have seen some organizations who do more of that dashboard scorecard. How much knowledge have you shared? How much have you contributed? How many knowledge nuggets have you used? That's been kind of classic. I don't see it as much as I used to.
Okay.
You know, one other session that I think really spoke to this was the breakout session that Shopify did. And really simple solutions for individuals and teams to better organize their stuff. They had a whole campaign that was just called Tidy Up. That was about just tidying up, the spaces where you have documents and things like that. And they have some videos that are 1 minute kind of productivity hacks for what I would call personal KM of various sorts. How do you better access things? How do you better store things? And the videos are participatory. So the idea is you can do the 1 minute video and you can at least start the hack while you're doing the video. And they've had a lot of it, a lot of uptake on that because it's so simple and it's so easy. And people are like, okay, I can watch a 1 minute video and do something. So I think the key that I've seen in the personal KM is to make it really accessible and straightforward for folks.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah.
No, it's a great question. And it's probably an area where enterprise KM could provide better, at least self-service resources to people who want to get their own knowledge in order. It's like just helping people make better sense of their own knowledge so that they can contribute it and share it and and elevate what makes sense to those enterprise systems. I think it would be mutually beneficial. So all of you on the call, Danielle, Susan, and Darren, all led one of our small group conversations at the conference. And in this All Around People, the topics for those tend to be around these people, culture, change management, talking to leadership type of topics, because that's where people really want to learn from one another in those small group settings. And I was hoping you would just go around and share a couple of things that you either took away from that session or that surprised you, or just anything that you feel like you learned or was interesting about the session that you led. And Danielle, I was going to ask you to go first. I think you were in the Becoming Core to Leadership session.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So I guess the first thing, it was no surprise to everyone that it was a think tank session, and it was a mixture of both KM and the PM representatives. And it was really cool to just sit in a room and realize that we all kind of are facing a lot of the same problems. And just like the conference was highlighting, we're all in this together. And so 3 of the top things that I took out of this discussion from organizations that seem to be doing this really well at, becoming core to their leadership team. One of the things is just making sure that you're aligning your KM and PM work to the business strategy and finding a way to measure and show the return on investment of that program as it relates to the business outcomes. So that means whatever your business cares about, like you better be caring about, right? And you better make sure that you have a way to measure it and show how valuable it is to the organization. The second thing was just always finding ways to make your leadership look good and to celebrate them. And we kind of chuckled about that, but it's really just, you know, when some of the organizations have a lot of new leaders that rotate into that position, and it's kind of sitting down with them and saying, what's important to you during your stint here? How can I help support you? And then also, as they transition out of that role, say, you know what, can I have a little debrief interview with you and say, you know, what are some lessons learned? How would you like us to capture how you want to be remembered in this role for forever in this organization? So they have some skin in the game. They really want to make sure that KM is successful from their perspective as well. And then the third thing was around using the power of storytelling, which you mentioned earlier, Lauren. It's making sure that you're bringing your leadership into the journey, that you're painting for them that strategic vision, and that you're tailoring the message so that they understand it. You know, I know we all speak PM and KM all day long, and that was so cool at the conference. But when you go back to your organizations, you know, if you have a great program, but your leaders don't really understand what you're saying, it's kind of a lost cause. So just make sure that you're tailoring and translating that message. So yeah, those were my top 3 takeaways, and it was a really great session.
Yeah, I got to listen to some of that session afterwards. And I think that this conversation about how do you make knowledge flow seamless without KM itself being invisible, so you make sure you get credit,
Yeah.
even though you're trying to make something feel effortless, is a really interesting conversation.
It is. So thank you.
Yeah, so Darren, I think that you were in the tipping point for engagement conversation. So I'm interested in what your takeaways were there.
Yeah, that is correct, Lauren. So similar to what Danielle was just saying with the being core to leadership is you can't do KM in a vacuum. You have to truly understand the goals and objectives of your organization. What are their needs and what are some of the potential gaps? And once you are able to better understand what your overall organization is trying to accomplish and where KM can play a role, you look to find quick wins. And then you look to find your organizational champions. And then you try to find small ways that you can start making a difference and aligning your priorities with the priorities of your stakeholders. And it's a lot of like simple concepts, but it really is creating these building blocks that eventually help you get to that tipping point where you keep introducing new things that make a difference and then try to measure the value of those things you're implementing and be able to showcase the value you're providing. And over time, as you introduce more and more concepts and you try to do things not so much at a like a business unit level, but trying to think more at an enterprise level, if you can over time, you really start seeing that tipping point happen. But it's just looking for ways to stay in front of the organization, in front of the leadership, and like the point you were just making sure that they know some of the processes or initiatives that you're putting in place are directly from the KM organization, and that helps drive your value. And then the next initiative becomes that much easier to push forward for engagement.
Yeah, I think one of the things in your session that stood out to me was people don't want to do above the flow KM, and just before people see that value, getting them to put some skin in the game and do some of that work that's kind of necessary to get it off the ground is always challenging. So I think that pilot small, sort of incremental approach is the only way to go in those situations. So Susan, I know you were in this session on change management for digital transformation. So what did you take away from that?
I was fortunate enough to be able to facilitate that. And it's interesting how all of these breakout sessions fit together in change management, right? You have to be able to speak to your leaders. You have to understand how people are engaged in a constant state of change. And we become change managers as much as process or knowledge managers. And it really came down to that emotional intelligence discussion. It came down to how do we increase psychological safety and work with our sibling organizations like HR to understand people's resistance to change. They'll blame anything, right? They used to blame process, they used to blame knowledge, now they're blaming digital. And understanding how digital fits into the knowledge base of the company. So we talked a lot about that psychological safety and digital confidence and different techniques like microlearning. Like, let's just don't look at the big digital explosion. Let's look at small piece parts that you can start to do in your everyday work that are going to enable you to make better, more accurate decisions. We even took it to an engagement technique that if you're gonna mirror your business in your program, you need to make sure that you're mirroring your business in their client's eyes as well. So for the first time in a long time, my company has customers. So there can be a model that we drive toward the digital challenges they're experiencing. If we can help them through that in our programs, that's just going to add more value and perhaps even bring that ROI tangible measurement to the justification for our programs.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. I think that digital transformation, some CAM programs have been really energized by it, and some of them have just been bowled over by it, either from a structural or funding perspective, or just from a change fatigue. There's too much going on. I can't handle this perspective. And it's been interesting to see those two things happen in tandem. Like for some, it's been a real accelerant, but others, right, it's been a diversion.
It's hard to start saying words like psychological safety and emotional intelligence. You know, we're always trying to be hardcore business people, and when we remind ourselves that it isn't the change, it's the resistance to change that causes the most anxiety, and that's in the heart and mind of a human being. So we need to address that if we're going to continue to grow at the pace we need to grow to stay competitive. And I think that's true in every organization.
Yeah. Well, and there's some conversation going on in the chat about, you know, return on investment, and it's always about the money. I think that's where the hard data, and, you know, as much as it can be, can come in, and where you really need to make that business case, but yeah, you need all of these enablers or you're never going to get there. Right. So it's like, maybe we don't always go in and talk about emotional intelligence and psychological safety, but we definitely need to foster it.
That's right. That's right.
I know one thing, guys, those of you who led our session, our conversations, and thank you very much. It was standing room only, and we had to shut the door down because it's a small group conversation. I told Nancy, I said, we may need more of these next time, because they bring out some of the best insights from people. So thank you all for leading it.
Personal opinion there. Those are where I got to apply what we were learning from the breakout session or from the formal sessions, and I found them absolutely most valuable.
Thank you, Susan. They're nice.
Yeah, I think that was the takeaway. We had to have some bouncers on the rooms to make sure that we didn't get 40 people in a small group conversation. So we definitely need to do more of that and redesign a little bit for more of that group interactivity. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely.
So I do have a final poll in here, and I was really just interested from the audience perspective, you know, which of these themes you see applying to your KM effort, you know, right now. And you can select all of them or none of them. You know, I think some of these are maybe a little bit more evergreen. Some of them may be more situationally dependent. But just whether these themes and the things that we're hearing on a really broad level are resonating with you. I'm always interested in that. Cindy, where do you think we're going to see the most impact here?
Man, they're going to make a liar out of me quick. I would say building the partnerships. You know, we started, Carla Odell, our chairman, and of course, knowledge management expert. She started talking about getting your partnerships in line 10 years ago or more. And I just think we want to, I know that when Jeff and I did the exercise to say, talk about the barriers that prohibit process and knowledge, from coming together. And a lot of it is things that are out of your control, like you report into different people, different budgets, they're perceived differently. There was a lot about integration, and then culture. That word kept coming back, saying we just don't see it. Our leadership doesn't see that as being important.
I think it's going to be those user needs and reacting to changing demand within the organization, just based on the research and conversations that I have.
All right, you're gonna find out.
Yeah, I think we've given you guys enough time to vote. We'll go look at it. Oh, look at that, Cindy, you win. Building partnerships or shared strategies. Yeah. I don't have a prize for you, but I'll look for one.
Even you guys are kind of, it's a lot, right?
But a lot of these are, at least a large minority, if not a majority, are experiencing that, seeing that somewhere in what they're doing around KM. So I think that's validating to that what we see at the conference and what we see in research is happening out in the broader world.
And for my panelists, one of the things, it was said to me twice at the conference and then once post-conference from one of our members who are just getting in the game of knowledge management formally. Two people looked and said, and this sort of leads to it, said, Cindy, this is so overwhelming. We don't even know what to do. There's so many choices of ways you can go. What do you tell people like that? I mean, man, it's true. We know so much. How do you get people to focus and make a difference right away?
I know Danielle should have to weigh into this because she's helped me over the years and been quite an expert in this answer. So sorry, Lauren, to cut you off, but please, Danielle, some dewdrops of wisdom.
Oh yes, the wisdom dropping. Okay. No, there's a lot that you could do. I'm thinking a couple different organizations I've worked with just helping get it started and off the ground. And a lot of that from my perspective is just identifying those the key knowledge and those key processes that you're trying to drive results from the business, getting those somehow centralized, documented to where you can share them in the best way, and then start measuring that result over time. And then you start to get that leadership buy-in, and you start seeing that strategic value, and it starts being added into the foundation of the strategy. And just really focusing in on your key processes and people that will drive that business forward. So that's where I've seen a lot of value and where you can start. Anything to add, Susan or Darren?
Darren, are you there?
I'm here. I would say, where we're going is just what we just talked about. The knowledge management for me is going to stretch the boundaries of what it does. The scope of services of what a core KM team is no longer, I think, pertinent going forward. The evolution of digital, the process improvement requirements, just the way, at least from my perspective, that I see in professional services and specifically in healthcare consulting, there's just such an emphasis on using KM now as a differentiator as a lot of industries become commoditized. So I think the future's super bright.
Yeah, I just find the biggest problem and start there, because there's always energy for it. There's always budget for it. And there's going to be a KM intervention or enabler that we can put some structure around. And by leaning on our processes, especially where quality or continuous improvement are targeting, trying to keep and stay competitive, that's a great place to start. And that's where people start to lean in and say, oh, give me some of that. Give me some of that.
Yeah, somebody had weighed in on the chat that KM is a small fish in a big pond, and it needs to partner to be effective. And I think that continues to be more and more true as we see convergence between things like learning and KM and digital, and nobody really cares what team is providing that service. They just want it to work. They want it to, and they want one answer. You know, I think when I think about where we're headed, the one concern that I have is as we get focused on knowledge products, digital, you know, delivering a better service, and it's all the plumbing that gets knowledge where it needs to go. I worry a little bit that we don't have as much focus on what is our critical knowledge and really focusing on what's flowing through the pipes versus the plumbing. And I think that some teams are doing a really good job of balancing that, but I see some going a little bit more towards, well, I want to make sure that I provide you with everything within the organization as seamlessly and effectively as possible without figuring out what people really need to know, what's accurate, what's relevant, what's going to be critical to them. And I don't think that we're at a point where we can rely on technology alone to do that for us. So that's my only caveat here. But I'm excited about everything that's going on in this space.
It's not going away. I think, guys, there's one in the chat. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I think KM continues as we've struggled for 25 years, and we're going to continue. We've got to continue to show the impact on performance of the business. I think you've got to be able to say what the organization's business is and how knowledge impacts that. And KM is there just to harness that, really. That's how it makes it happen. And so I think we've got to continue to focus on that. And we've got some great resources Lauren has put in the resource library at APQC that talks about using the language of measurement that you have already in your business and looking at it through a knowledge lens. It's a couple of really good pieces.
Yeah, we have great resources on that. And I also think that our breakout speakers in particular, a lot of them spoke to the measurement and the value in their context. And I just wanted to let everybody know, whether you were at the conference or not, we have written overviews and slides from most, if not all of the sessions. All of that is going to go into the resource library on next Tuesday, on the 31st of May. So look for those links. They'll all be in big collections. We want you to engage with that content and give us feedback on, you know, what you learned from it, you know, what you'd like to see in next year's event, you know, where you feel like there would be great opportunities for sessions and conversation, and start thinking about that, because we got to start thinking about next year already. But I know we are about at time. Thank you so much all for joining. Thank you to our amazing steering committee and Cindy for helping me talk about a conference that I did not get to go to. So it really does take a village, and I appreciate all the collaboration and teamwork. And I hope to see you all next month on the webinar. We're going to talk about KM benchmarks and metrics. And I hope that I will get to see you all next year in person at APQC's conference. So take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Lauren.